This week on Government Matters.
Geofencing is good in the idea. There are some limitations. If someone has ill intent, they could just build their own drone with parts they buy off the internet.
The FAA says consumers will buy about 1 million drones this holiday season. Will their registration rule improve safety in U.S. skies?
Well, this is an issue that has been on the front burner for Congress since 2009 for many members who felt that the cybersecurity defenses of our nation needed to be strengthened.
A year-end budget bill includes the most significant cyber legislation in years. We break it down bite by bite.
Right now, 83% of new service members do not get a pension because they don't spend a career in the military.
Military retirement reform could be a boon for the Thrift Savings Plan. We detail the auto-enrollment of new troops. Government Matters starts right now.
From ABC 7 and News Channel 8, this is Government Matters.
To our viewers around the world on the American Forces Network and here in the nation's capital, thanks for joining us. Government is the engine that runs this city. That's why Government Matters. Every week we'll bring you the top headlines in tech, security, and management. I'm your host, Morris Jones. President Obama says counterterrorism officials do not have any specific credible information that suggests a terror attack against the U.S. this holiday season. Mr. Obama visited the Pentagon and the National Counterterrorism Center this week as Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson rolled out a new terror alert bulletin. Bazi Kanani has more.
It happened in Chattanooga, Tennessee, in Garland, Texas, and most recently in San Bernardino, California.
The reality is terrorist-inspired individuals have conducted or attempted to conduct attacks in the United States this year.
Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson announces a new type of warning about the potential for those attacks. The new bulletin warns of self-radicalized actors who could strike public events and places with little or no warning. It's a new category added to the current terror advisory system that replaced the old color-coded system back in 2011. Johnson said until now, the current system would only alert Americans if there was intelligence picking up a credible and specific threat to the homeland, which there has not been in years.
This system has never been deployed. It's time we change this system.
While the lower-level bulletin is a warning about general trends in terrorism, it comes with specific action to protect the country.
The public should expect an increased presence of law enforcement across communities in the weeks ahead. More stringent security should also be anticipated at public places and events.
The new bulletin will be in effect for 6 months. It also warns about the backlash against Muslim and Arab Americans, saying there is heightened concern about threats and violence directed toward them. Bazi Kanani, ABC News, Washington.
Defense Secretary Ash Carter says he made a mistake. During a trip to Iraq, Carter acknowledged he used his personal iPhone to send administrative messages. Carter says none of them contained classified information, and they were all backed up by the DoD email system.
Particularly someone in my position and with the sensitivities about this issue should have known better. And Lena, there were plenty of people during the time that you're taking office and so forth who explained to you what the rules are about email. So this is, it's not like I didn't have the opportunity to understand what the right thing to do is. I didn't do the right thing. This is entirely on me.
John McCain called Carter's mistake hard to believe, considering all the attention around former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server. Legislation and regulation can be baffling. Take this week's omnibus. It's massive, a 2,009-page spending bill with accompanying documents. More on that later. A D.C.-based startup wants to help lawyers, lobbyists, and public servants gain insight into all of that. Legalese through a big data analytics program. Diane Cho profiles FiscalNote.
At the age of 23, Tim Hwang not only holds the title of Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of FiscalNote, he's a former member of the Montgomery County School Board, a title he earned before being legally allowed to vote.
I actually kind of barreled down the political path and decided kind of to shift gears a little bit later and study computer science. And so when you actually combine these sort of two interests of mine in computer science and public policy, you sort of realize that there's a lot of these problems in policy and politics that can be very easily solved through technology.
Working out of a Motel 6 in Silicon Valley, Huang and a couple of his high school classmates started their own company.
The platform is completely automated. There's not a single human touching any portion of the back end of the platform. Everything is software engineered. Everything is completely based off of technology.
He says the first product they created, called Prophecy, allows users to aggregate legislation from across the U.S. and in Congress to understand how those bills are changing.
The traditional way of getting this information was actually to try and contract out with K Street firms, lobbying firms, law firms, or hire in-house.
He says Prophecy uses a search algorithm in real time that allows users to search a topic, find the bills related to it using artificial intelligence to calculate the likelihood it will pass. The company boasts a 94% accuracy rate. It also calculates how likely lawmakers are to vote on a specific bill, which he admits prompts a lot of calls from lawmakers themselves.
I've seen lawmakers that are adamant that there's no computer in the world that will be able to kind of capture what's going on in their head. But in a world where we can have behavioral advertising and incredibly targeted micro-targeting of voters and of consumers, it's not terribly difficult to find the profile of one individual person and actually quantify that information.
Their second product focuses on the regulatory side.
What we do is we surface up all the pending rules and regulations as it pertains to every three-letter agency here in Washington, as well as every state regulatory agency around the country.
Huang says this form of analytics has no limit. He wants to expand his 2-year-old company into case law and go international. For Government Matters, I'm Diane Cho.
In Tech Matters, the small drone registration rule. The Federal Aviation Administration just announced what it calls a streamlined and user-friendly web-based aircraft registration process for owners of small unmanned aircraft. Joining me with the latest is Matt McFarland, editor of Innovations at the Washington Post. Matt, let's start with the rule itself. Give us the basics.
Sure thing. Starting Monday, the website will launch, and anyone with a drone weighing between 0.5 or about a half a pound, 250 grams, and 55 pounds will need to register their drone. So if you already own a drone, you have until February 19th. If you're buying a drone after Monday, you need to register it before your first flight.
And there's a sense of urgency here. The FAA estimates as many as 1 million small drones will be sold this holiday season. Most of those purchases will happen outside the Beltway. Is there some kind of mechanism in place to inform all those consumers, Matt?
Right. Well, that's a good question. They are trying to get the word out. They have this Know Before You Fly campaign. They're also asking drone companies to do their part and let people know, hey, you need to register your drone.
This announcement has prompted plenty of criticism. Here's a big one. Some observers have questioned the legality of the registration system. Eli Dorado, director of the Technology Policy Program at George Mason's Mercatus Center, believes the rule would be overturned if challenged in court, given how the government rushed the rulemaking process, meaning less chance for public comments. Now, Matt, is that a fair critique?
Right. Well, we have known that drones are coming for quite some time. This isn't something that, just appeared out of nowhere. Companies have been developing drones. We've seen this technology evolving. So, yeah, I think it is a fair complaint, but we haven't seen anyone step up yet and say, hey, we're going to challenge this.
The $5 fee is also a point of contention. Tell us more about that.
Right. The government set up a task force to issue recommendations for how to handle this process. They suggested a free process so that there wouldn't be a deterrent to registration. However, the FAA says under its statutes, it is required to charge a fee for registration.
Well, the FAA, as we know, is really between a rock and a hard place here. They want to make U.S. airspace safer, but 1 million drones represents a huge challenge. The small drone registration rule is the first step. What do you think would be next?
Yeah, there just needs to be a lot of education and just development in this space. One interesting example is getting information out to drone owners through, for example, there's this service called AirMap that a few drone companies have adopted, that when a person turns on their drone, they get up-to-the-date information about, is it safe to fly here, or, are they in a temporary flight restriction zone or near an airport?
You know, the genie is already out of the bottle, I'm afraid, and if not now, it's going to happen very soon. Why not make the drone manufacturers install geofencing capabilities? I know that would be expensive, but if you do enough of it, you could get a good price point, but people aren't going to sign up and register, and even if they do, you're going to have people, you know, over parades, as was the case in New York last month. You're going to have people at airports, near airports. What about geofencing? Is that even feasible?
Right, yeah, so geofencing is good in the idea. There are some limitations. If someone has ill intent, they could just build their own drone with parts they buy off the internet and not have geofencing. So
but they're not going to register anyway. I'm talking about the
Right.
hobbyists who just make mistakes, may or may not register, but will still fly over the White House or near LAX or someplace.
Yeah, and geofencing is definitely a good idea in that case. We've seen some manufacturers adopt that, for example, DJI, and it's a promising trend, at least somewhat of a step forward in keeping these drones where they should be.
Well, I'm telling you, they need to do it sooner than later. We'll keep on top of the story. In the meantime, Matt McFarland, editor of Innovations at the Washington Post. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
We'll turn from tech to security straight ahead on Government Matters. The omnibus or spending bill contains a rider that could dramatically impact cybersecurity information sharing between the public and private sectors. We'll get a crash course next. In security matters, cyber implications of the year-end spending bill. At press time, lawmakers were poring over more than 2,000 pages of spending legislation. If passed, the omnibus will raise wages for federal workers by 1.3%, fund the government through 2016, and promote information sharing about cyber threats. For more, I'm joined by Robert Efrus, founder and CEO of Efrus Federal Advisors. Well, Rob, you've had a busy week. Let's start with a history lesson. Congress has struggled to pass significant cyber legislation for years. Why?
Well, this is an issue that has been on the front burner for Congress since 2009 for many members who felt that the cybersecurity defenses of our nation needed to be strengthened. And it's taken a long time, but the Congress has finally come to an agreement on a piece of cyber legislation called the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act. And it's taken so long because there are some contentious issues in terms of the role of government and the concern about privacy being compromised through government surveillance.
The cyber provision in the omnibus brings together 3 different versions of past cyber bills. It will encourage companies to share cyber threat information with the government. Will also provide those companies with liability protections. How will that work?
Well, companies that voluntarily share threat information with the government will be indemnified by the government for any lawsuits or any liability associated with that threat sharing. And the government will set up a process by which companies share threat data with both the government and other companies through a portal at the Department of Homeland Security.
What role will the Department of Homeland Security play in this process then?
Homeland will maintain this portal. They will also be responsible within 6 months after the omnibus is signed to set up a set of ground rules for how privacy will be protected in the threat sharing process.
Rob, the bill also calls on businesses and the government to scrub personal identifiable information, or PII, from threat data. What does that mean?
That means, firstly, that companies in sharing threat data with the government will scrub that data to take out any PII information, turn that information over to the Department of Homeland Security, and then DHS will then be responsible for a second scrub to take out that PII data.
We know the White House supports this cyber provision, but who opposes it?
Well, it's principally privacy advocates who view this legislation as a surveillance bill that negatively impacts the privacy of U.S. citizens. And there are a handful of members in the Congress that have announced their opposition to this legislation because of privacy concerns, but their opposition is not expected to in any way hinder the passage of the omnibus.
I read an article in the Federal Times, Rob, that compared the cyber provision to FTARA, the Federal IT Acquisition Reform Act. They both hitched a ride on year-end spending bills. They are arguably the 2 most significant pieces of IT legislation in the past 2 years. Is that a problem or a necessary evil?
Well, it's a problem to the extent that Congress has become increasingly dysfunctional in terms of the number of bills it passes each year in general. And while the House, on the one hand, has been fairly productive in passing IT reform legislation and cyber legislation, when those bills go to the Senate side, they have died in the past. And so the fact that they're hitched to spending bills suggests that, unfortunately, the way the Congress works these days, that these issues need to be linked to a so-called must-pass piece of legislation in order for it to have a shot at getting enacted into law.
You do what you got to do. Robert Efrus, founder and CEO of Efrus Federal Advisors. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
We'll turn from security to management straight ahead on Government Matters. By 2018, the Thrift Savings Plan could be adding as many as 250,000 new participants each year. We talk military retirement reform next. In Management Matters, military retirement reform and the Thrift Savings Plan. The Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board, or FRTIB, manages 401k-style savings plans for about 4.7 million people. That includes 700,000 military service members. But those ranks will swell in the years ahead. For more, I'm joined by Kellie Lunney, senior correspondent for Government Executive. Kellie, let's start with the 2016 National Defense Authorization Act. It contains a provision which mandates the auto-enrollment of new troops into the TSP. Tell us more.
That's right. It mandates that all new troops meaning service members who come in Jan 1, 2018, will be automatically enrolled in the Thrift Savings Plan at 3% of their pay with a 1% government deposit. After 2 years of service, the government will be able to match up to 5%. The notion behind the law is to get service members at every stage of their career interested into contributing to their retirement nest egg. Right now, 83% of new service members do not get a pension because they don't spend a career in the military. And so this is a way that everybody can start saving early and have skin in the game, regardless of whether you stay 20 years or less.
Now, how is the FRTIB positioned to handle all of those additional participants?
Well, they've done this before. They have experience, most notably in 2010, when they had to implement an auto-enrollment plan for federal civilian employees. As you know, TSP has 4.7 million participants. They anticipate that they could get up to 250,000 more per year with this new auto-enrollment with service members. They are talking to their vendors who they have contracts with, trying to understand the IT piece of it right now. They do have 2 years to implement this, so they have some time to do it. They're also ready to bring on more staff or additional resources if they need to. They're not necessarily anticipating that right now. The other part of it is they have to work with the Defense Department, specifically the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, which does payroll for the Pentagon. And they're going to be a very significant partner in getting this implemented and up and running correctly.
Now, here's what I want to know. What role does the Smart Savings Act play in this discussion?
That was a law that was passed in 2014. It was implemented this past summer. It's really sort of a model for what they're trying to do with the service members. That law auto-enrolls civilian employees into the L Fund. The L Fund is a life cycle fund. It's a TSP offering that essentially is a higher risk but higher yield offering. It's something that is pegged towards your retirement year. L 2040 would be, if you are somebody who is anticipated to retire in 2040, you would be in that life cycle fund. And really the idea behind that is to get people who are new employees into the system into a higher yield at the beginning of their career, so that when they get closer to the retirement age, it goes to more conservative offerings. And the idea being that at the end of your career, retirement, you have a bigger nest egg to have to work with.
Now, Kellie, there's at least one aspect of military retirement reform that's viewed as controversial. I'm talking about lump sum payouts. Bring us up to date.
Yes, that's right. That really affects the people who stay in the military for an entire career, 20 years or more. Right now, if you stay in the military for 20 years, you get a pension at the end when you retire, and you could retire when you're relatively young, 45, 46, even younger, and then go on to a second career. Right now, those service members get a continuous payment. It's a monthly check, essentially, pension check. With the lump sum option, they will be able to choose to take a lump sum of their pension when they retire. They could take the entire lump sum, they could take a partial lump sum, or they could continue doing the continuous payments. The controversy around that is if you make an unwise investment with your lump sum, when you take it, you have to wait until 67 for those pension checks to restart again.
Interesting. All right, before you go, put all of this into context for us. Will military retirement reform make the TSP stronger?
It certainly will make the TSP a stronger component of the overall military retirement system, and that's really the intent of the law, is to get service members at every age, at every stage of their career, regardless of how long they stay in the service, to contribute to that nest egg, to start contributing, to not even have to think about it, essentially, so that by the time they leave, they can roll it over to a 401k if they decide to take a private sector job, or if they decide to stay in, they could potentially get retention pay at 12 years. So it's really about making the TSP a stronger part of the military retirement system. On the other hand, you know, this is the responsibility of the service member to educate themselves about the best investment choices that are before them, and that's the financial education piece of it. The Defense Department is really going to have to do that. It's a really important piece of this law to educate all members about what their options are.
You bet. All of this very timely information. Kellie Lunney, senior correspondent for Government Executive. Thanks, Kellie.
Thanks very much.
Star Wars: The Force Awakens is expected to shatter box office records. At least one senator will be in the audience. Maryland Democrat Barbara Mikulski seems pretty much excited about it. She posted this video to social media.
So God bless you, God bless America, and may the force continue to be with us. May that force be with us. May the force be with us. And may the force be with us. May the force continue to be with you. And may the force be with you. And may the force continue to be with Hubble and all of us. And may the force be with us. God bless you, and may the force and the spirit of Senator Kennedy be with us. May the force continue to be with you. May the force.
That's the latest from Washington. Thanks for being with us. I'm Morris Jones. We know your week is filled with other matters. Save this half hour for us.